Good evening. The rabbi, physician, and philosopher Moses Maimonides, the Rambam, famously outlined 8 rungs in the ladder of charitable giving. The top rung of the ladder is reserved for those who do not merely give material contributions, but who enable the recipient to become more self-reliant. In the case of Arthur Fried, to whose memory we pay tribute to this evening, the 8th and highest rung of giving was an everyday feature of his life. This was true in his philanthropic role and at a personal level. He taught the people he encountered self-reliance. That was Arthur's philanthropy, his own personal gift. He guided so many of the people he interacted with to find the best in themselves. He sought the same for the recipients of the charitable donations that he oversaw. He treated them with dignity and with respect, thus providing not only for their material needs, but broadening and deepening their sense of self. To accomplish this within the context of charitable giving requires gifts granted to very few, and it exemplified the very top rung of Maimonides' hierarchy. Arthur also had tremendous influence on me. He shaped me as a professional, as what he called a philanthropic entrepreneur. He is the man from whom I learned from most, and I miss him terribly. Tonight, we will hear from Mem Bernstein, the chair of Avichai and Karen Keshet, who worked hand in hand with Arthur for more than 2 decades. From Melissa Fried Harbader, Arthur's eldest daughter and the incoming chair of Avichai and Beit Avichai. From Yossi Prager, the executive director of Avichai North America from 1994 to 2019. From Ellie Silver, the executive director of Avichai Israel from 1995 to 2019. From Salai Meridor, Israel's ambassador to the United States from 2006 to 2009, and the incoming director of the National Library of Israel. From J. Ezra Merkin, managing partner, Gabriel Capital Group, and Arthur's lifelong friend. We will also have a short musical interlude with Israeli singer-songwriter Rona Kainan, who will perform Naomi Shemer's El Barot HaMaim. It is my honor to introduce Mem Bernstein. Mem.
Thank you all for coming. When my late husband, Zalman Chaim Bernstein, died on January 6th, 1999, the man standing in the hospital room with me was Arthur W. Fried. And when Arthur was not with his wife, Susan, his 7 children, his daughter-in-law, his sons-in-law, and his many grandchildren, he continues to stand by my side until we said goodbye to one another on Thursday, March 31st, just days before his death on April 5th. I think we both knew we would not see one another again. Arthur and I shared an extraordinary friendship and working partnership, which we had maintained for the 23 years from Zalman's passing until Arthur's. And when Arthur took ill and began treatment in New York almost a year ago, we, myself and the staff of our foundations, did what Arthur and his family had requested. We kept his illness to ourselves. Arthur never liked to occupy center stage. He never sought recognition, and he disliked being the object of attention. He avoided honors and tributes, and he hated being fussed over. So although we knew how many people would have wanted to know about Arthur's declining health and would have wanted to tell him how much they cared for him and treasured his friendship, we honored his wishes and kept silent. During that time, I, more than most, was blessed to have shared the last 3 months of Arthur's life with him and with Susan in New York, and for that, I will always be grateful. To me, Arthur was a rare kind of soulmate who could share the personal highs and lows of everyday life and the many practical and professional challenges associated with running a network of complex charitable organizations: the Avichai Foundation, Beit Avichai, the Tikva Fund, and Karen Keshet. We were, to a great many people, simply Arthur and Mem, a two-headed unit held together by an uncanny spiritual bond and an unbreakable bedrock of shared values. On a personal level, his passing leaves a great unfillable void in my world. Of course, it also leaves a tremendous legacy of work on behalf of the Jewish people, Jewish culture and continuity, Jewish learning, Jewish values, and the future of the Jewish state. In all of these things, Arthur's wisdom and his great good heart lives on. Of all the gifts Arthur brought to the field of Jewish philanthropy, the one I admired the most and from which I still learn was his calm, discerning appreciation of other people's talents, the wisdom to know when to offer help and guidance, and yes, sometimes correction, but also when to step back and give people the means and the latitude to use their God-given gifts as they judge best. The result of that kind of discernment is a wealth of Jewish leaders and institutions in North America, Israel, and the former Soviet Union, whose work was made possible by more than just the material resources that Arthur and I were privileged to share with them. Reinforcing and multiplying the value of what we provided was another huge but less tangible gift. The penetrating wisdom, the technical brilliance, and the steadfast commitment to essential values that Arthur brought to every element of our philanthropy, that was the gift. As Arthur shared that gift with them, he shared it even more deeply and persistently with me. My life, my understanding of the world, and I hope my efforts in philanthropy are all immeasurably better for his influence. I know that memorial talks are supposed to include some humorous remembrances, and at first I thought it would be easy to provide some. After all, Arthur and I laughed all the time. Our philanthropy was a consistently joyful thing. And there were lots of many funny moments, yet as I scoured my memory, I couldn't come up with anything specific. Seeking help, I turned to one of Arthur's daughters. With all that laughter, I asked her, why can't I remember a single funny story about Arthur? And she explained it. Because for all that time, we were laughing at him. And it's true. We found his obsessive perfectionism, his relentless attention to detail, his unwillingness to let go of anything before he had revised it and reworked it and polished it and fine-tuned it a dozen times. We found all of that hilarious. But here's the wrinkle. Arthur was in on the joke. He was more than in on it. He set it up. He knew perfectly well that we considered him clinically obsessive, and he loved playing to that type. After nearly every episode where he worked something to death or picked it apart for its flaws or sent it back for the fourth or fifth revision, that brilliant toothy grin would spread across his face. He had just acted the part of Arthur, and like everything he did, he had acted it to perfection. He knew his audience would eat it up, and we did. In all the years we worked together in every place that we worked, Arthur and I faced each other across two adjoining desks. It was that kind of partnership, face to face, always together, no secrets. So I got to see him in his dealings with other people, both the amicable and the less amicable. And I saw him making decisions when no one else was watching. On some of those occasions, I would see the quiet, unknown acts of compassion and generosity that other people never saw. At those moments, sometimes I would say, "You know, Arthur, you really are a very good man." And Arthur would always respond, "Don't tell anyone." I respected that wish in his lifetime. I hope he'll forgive my straying from that commitment now. When Arthur and I started our journey in philanthropy, we were expected to carry on the work that my late husband, Zalman Bernstein, had begun, to carry it on, to enhance it, to expand it, and when we thought the time was right, to pass it on to those whom we knew we could count on to do the same. To that end, after much conversation, 3 years ago, Arthur and I decided that the time was right for us to refresh and renew the board of directors of Avichai and Beit Avichai. We wanted to make sure that the board would be ready to engage with the challenges confronting the Jewish community in the next generations, with all the vigor and imagination that we had tried to bring to the job. Arthur, who so deeply understood the demands of good governance, who had built strong boards and served on them and led them, was determined to arrange the passing of the torch that would not only rejuvenate Avichai and Beit Avichai, but also ensure a continuity of spirit. So we turned to those we trusted most, our trustees of over 23 years. Lauren Merkin, Ruth Weiss, Alan Feld, George Rohr, Avital Darmon, Meir Bazaglo, and Leif Dov Rosenblatt. We asked each one of them to choose one of their children to succeed them. Each one chose an extraordinary candidate. Last November, our new board gathered in New York with our current board to meet one another and begin to work together so that they could carry on the foundation's work when their time comes. This coming November, replacing our current board will be Neira Bazaglo, Tamar Darmon, Ariella Feld-Goldwicht, my daughters Suzanne Dryan-Felsen, Sophia Merkin, Rebecca Rohr-Ritter, Andre Rosenblatt, Jacob Weiss, and the next chair succeeding first Arthur and then me will be Arthur's daughter, Alyssa Fried-Harbader. Soon, as David said, you'll be hearing from Alyssa, and you'll hear from others about Arthur's contribution to the Jewish world. I intentionally spent most of my time today dwelling on the influence Arthur had on me personally, not because that's so important by itself, though of course it is to me, as he created the philanthropist I was hoping to be, but what I experienced in my decades of friendship and partnership with Arthur is not so different from what many other people also experienced. His warmth, his concern, his guidance and compassion, and his consummate skill as a mentor and an inspiration to others. He shared all of that with me, and I know he did with many of you as well. As I, Arthur's family, and legions of other people grieve his loss, we will also carry on, sadder of course, and maybe a little diminished, but also invigorated and strengthened by his memory. We will cherish and continue to celebrate all he has given us, and combining his spirit with our own, we will enhance and expand the many projects to which Arthur devoted the greater part of his life, for the Jewish future, for Jewish families and children, for Jewish artists and writers and thinkers, and for the health and safety of the Jewish people everywhere. May his memory be a blessing.
My father meant many things to many people, and a life as meaningful and successful as his can be difficult to summarize in a few words. When my siblings and I were preparing for his burial, 2 psukim came to mind that best epitomize his life. The first pasuk is from the prophet Micha, who says, Higid lecha adam matov, u'ma Hashem doresh mimcha, ki masot mishpat va'avat chesed va'atznea lechet im Elokecha. God has told you what is good and what he requires of you, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk modestly with your God. My father was committed to asot mishpat, doing justice, which is also associated with honesty and fairness. My father had a keen sense of right and wrong. All his business and philanthropic transactions and interactions reflected his unwavering commitment to integrity and to honesty. But he was also ohev chesed, loving goodness by extending himself repeatedly to provide generously for people who face difficult circumstances. And in all his endeavors, he was extraordinarily tsanua, modest, and to the extent of what he did anonymously, preferring instead to remain in the background. The second is from the biblical description of Yitzchak Avinu, which was my father's Hebrew name. Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi, vayimtza b'shana hahi me'a sha'arim, vayivarcheu Hashem. Isaac sowed in that land and reaped 100-fold the same year. The Lord blessed him. While my father sowed much in his lifetime, he reaped far more than most people can achieve in many lifetimes, and the fruit of his labor continues to be felt around the Jewish world today. Nevertheless, he rarely took credit for his enormous achievements. Instead, vayivarcheu Hashem, he understood that his successes were a blessing from God, and similarly gave credit to and thanked my mother, Susan. When I first learned that I would have the opportunity to take his place as chair of the board, I was apprehensive, of course, but I was excited as well. My father was passionate about his work. He was dedicated, working long hours, and it was rare that he wasn't reading a report or an article or engaged in meetings and phone calls. Growing up and into adulthood, I learned by watching from the sidelines. I listened closely, eager to understand the details of his work, because he did not share them with us directly. He was private, carefully separating his personal life from his professional responsibilities. And so when I was directed to take his place, I felt honored that I would finally be led into the Kodesh HaKodashim, the holies of holies of my father's work life. I hoped and I expected that this would finally be the year that he would mentor me. So many people benefited from his mentorship, and I was eager for my turn to be led into the inner sanctum of his life, to learn from him directly, to be granted the opportunity to ask questions freely, and to spend time with him one-on-one. I simply wanted to hear him talk about his work and share his vision, but we unfortunately did not get the chance. And if I was nervous about taking on this position before, imagine how I feel now after the Shiv'ah, having heard all the incredible things that people said about him, about his laser focus, about how he changed the face of Jewish philanthropy worldwide. It is even clearer now than it was before that I am stepping into the boots of a giant. While I am sure people have their own memories of my father and of the wisdom and lessons that he shared with you over the years, I am guessing that none of your memories date back, like mine, to the time when you were 8 years old. I was in the 3rd grade, and we were living on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. Unfortunately, math was not my strong suit. It still isn't. My father, however, was an accountant and a successful investment banker, and numbers were his thing. It wasn't usually his role to help me with my homework, but on this particular day, he was working with me to memorize my multiplication tables. Mommy, do you remember this? Get ready. I was struggling with the 7 times table, and for some reason, I simply could not remember the correct answer for 7 times 8. I got it wrong again and again and again. Finally, my father picked up our television set, opened the window, held the television outside the window, threatening to drop it if I didn't get it right. 56, I yelled. Don't drop the TV. 7 times 8 is 56. To this day, you can wake me up in the middle of the night or distract me with a million other things, but if you ask me what 7 times 8 is, I will get it right every single time. My other memory is from about 10 years later. It was the day of my high school graduation here in Yerushalayim, and I had recently got my driver's license. On that afternoon, my father somehow agreed to be in the car with me while I ran errands for the ceremony. When we were almost done, I drove him back to the office. Having the car all to myself, I was feeling quite important and perhaps a bit too cocky, because as I turned left, not a block from where I dropped him off, I crashed into a shiny, new BMW. I was in tears. How was I going to tell my father what I had done? The owner of the BMW and I then proceeded to walk back to my father's office. They exchanged their insurance info, and once he was gone, I got a bit weepy. And as I thanked and apologized to my father, but without hesitating, he said, "Go dry your eyes, wash your face, take the keys, and go." I was shocked, but he stood firm. If you don't get back into the car right now, you're never going to drive confidently again. This was the best medicine to do what you need to do. My father taught by example. He may not have been warm and fuzzy, but he was teaching me important life lessons. In the first story, he taught the importance of knowing your stuff, going over things until you knew them cold, just as he did in his own life. And the second story showed me that it's okay to make a mistake, but you have to correct it and learn from it. My father was sharp, tough, and critical. He was a man of few words who was careful with his compliments. He had the highest of standards and little patience for imperfection, but he was nurturing in his own way. People keep asking me if I got to hear new stories about him during the Shiv'ah, but the truth is, my father was an open book. What you saw was what you got. And those 2 psukim encapsulate who he was and what he was in his personal and professional spheres. He was honest, modest, and grateful. This was the way he carried himself, no matter where he was, or the circumstances. I know that in passing the torch, my father was not looking for an exact replica of himself or of the way he did things. He wanted me and my new colleagues to take the lessons that he taught and to do the very best that we can with what we have to work to ensure a brighter future for the Jewish people. And that is exactly what we intend to do. יהי זכרו של יצחק זאב בן אברהם וחנה ברוך.
Alyssa Fried just quoted the verse in Micha that beautifully sums up for me the character of Arthur Fried, my greatest mentor and dear friend. Arthur surely pursued justice, loved goodness, and walked modestly with God. Arthur was also an extraordinary philanthropic leader, which is the way I came to know him. I partnered with Arthur in North America. There, Arthur defined Avichai's goal as growing the energizing nucleus across the spectrum of Jewish life through day schools and summer camps. We invested in these fields because Arthur believed that young people emerging from day schools and camps would invigorate the broader community with their Jewish literacy and passion. Arthur empowered the trustees and staff to employ an astonishingly wide array of philanthropic tools to advance the mission. It is uncommon for a single foundation to make grants and interest-free loans, to conduct basic research and publish policy papers, and to advocate for government support of the cause. Avichai did all this because of Arthur's expansive vision, expertise, contacts, and courage. Arthur was not afraid of risk. In the right circumstances, Arthur encouraged big bets with significant risks because he understood that while not acting feels safer, inaction might be the riskier course. For example, Arthur was fully aware of the high failure rate of nonprofit mergers. Nonetheless, when mergers became the most likely way to perpetuate some initiatives and organizations after the foundation's spend down, Arthur supported very costly and ultimately successful efforts to generate mergers. Arthur even stretched himself uncomfortably. In 2008, Joel Fleischman argued that we needed to begin partnering with other funders who might support our programs after a spend down. Arthur hated the idea. On reflection, he agreed to tolerate it, but only if Mem and the staff developed the funder relationships and left him privacy. In time, Arthur joined Mem as a vital partner in building relationships that assured the continuity of key projects. Arthur was wicked smart, with a memory the Mishnah describes as a cistern that never loses a drop. But the thing I prized most was his ability to anticipate future opportunities and challenges. On the philanthropic chessboard, Arthur saw many moves ahead. For example, Arthur perceived that technology would create amazing new opportunities for delivering education in school and at home, and he ensured that we were on the leading edge of the curve. Arthur lived to see Avichai North America's strategy and investments yield important results, but he seemed most proud of the people involved. Never gregarious in public, often reveling in his grumpiness, Arthur marveled at people's talents and contributions. This included our trustees, whom he admired to no end, staff, field leaders, his children and their spouses, and most of all, Susan. He and Mem too always said that Avichai's greatest legacy would be the people who benefited from the foundation's work and the staff. I am one of those people who represent Arthur's legacy. Most of my career in the Jewish community was as Arthur's partner. Although I reported to him, he treated me as a full partner in decision-making. He encouraged me to trust my own instincts. He asked challenging questions. He made excellent suggestions based on a lifetime of experience, and he always had my back. His written responses to my memos were full of praise. Arthur also had the back of the rest of our staff. He regularly said that the staff are the foundation's most precious resource. Arthur was a great raconteur. I found talking with him both spellbinding and intoxicating. Spellbinding because he really knew how to tell a story and he laughed easily. Intoxicating because this giant man, Arthur Fried, wanted to hear about my life and learn from me. I felt that way to our last conversation a few days before he passed. Arthur became my teacher and then close friend. As a friend, Arthur could be brutally honest when he thought ego was getting in the way of good judgment. Usually those observations of his started with a fierce bull bleep, but continued with empathy as he delivered his difficult message. Arthur had an amazing ability to be critical and loving at the same time. Most everything I know about philanthropic leadership and management I learned from Arthur. Here are 4 highlights. 1, dream big and take risks, but first pilot on a small scale. 2, empower staff and grantees, but first ask hard questions and then hold people accountable. 3, accept blame and give credit. 4, lead with your head and your heart. I strive all the time to do it as well as he did, knowing full well that in this, my reach will exceed my grasp. Arthur's chairman's message in Avichai's 2002 annual report referred to the pasuk in Shema, Vishinantam levanecha, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. Arthur wrote, one classic interpretation of the verse is provided by the unparalleled biblical commentator Rashi. His comment on the word diligently is as fresh today as the day he first explained it. Rashi indicates that when asked about our Judaism, we should be able to reply unhesitatingly, to be sharp and exact in our response, as well as in our understanding of who we are and for what we stand. Arthur did not intend these words to describe himself, but they do. Judaism always remained fresh for Arthur, and he delighted in discussions of Torah as well as Jewish history, philosophy, and sociology. Arthur was both observant and religious in a very natural way. Arthur replied unhesitatingly, and he was always sharp and exact in his response, reflecting a deep understanding of who he was and what he stood for. We are fortunate that the Almighty placed a man of Arthur's Jewish learning and confidence in extraordinary leadership positions. Arthur seized the opportunities and left a historic impact on the Jewish communities of North America and Israel. He also left an indelible impression on my heart. I miss Arthur very much and hope I can continue to follow in his path. His memory will be a blessing.
I feel privileged to be here and sing a song in memory of Arthur Fried. I'm going to sing El Borot HaMayim by Nomi Shemer, which I think is one of the most beautiful songs in the Hebrew language. It's a song about longing and yearning, but it's also a song about motion and continuity, and it's about finding a home. And I guess I want to say thank you. And I feel as if I say this thank you on behalf of many Israeli artists and musicians who have found a home here in Beit Avichai, thanks to the vision of Arthur Fried.
הלכתי אל בורות המים, בדרכי מדבר בארץ לא זרועה. מאהבתי שכחתי עיר ובית, ובעקבותיך פנהיה פרועה. רק אהבתי נתנה לי צל בקיץ ובסערת החול הנוראה. רק אהבתי בנתה לי עיר ובית, היא חיי והיא מותי מדי שעה. אל בורות המים אשר פועם בהר, שם אהבתי תמצא עדיין מי מבוע, מי תהום ומי נהר. שם התאנה ושם שתילי הזית ופריחת הרימונים המופלאה. שם אהבתי השיכורה ולא מיין, את עיניה תעצום לאט לאט אל בורות המים, אל בורות המים, אל המעיין אשר פועם בהר. שם אהבתי תמצא עדיין מי מבוע, מי תהום ומי נהר. אל בורות המים, אל בורות המים, אל המעיין אשר פועם בהר. שם אהבתי תמצא עדיין מי מבוע, מי תהום ומי נהר.
In the fall of 1995, I was interviewing for the position of CEO of Avichai Israel. Zalman Bernstein, Lezachro, was inclined to hire me. Arthur Fried was my final hurdle. Zalman required his approval. Despite warnings that Mr. Fried could be a tough interrogator, our conversation in his Yad HaNediv office was short and pleasant. He sent me away after 30 minutes with a grin and his consent. Arthur sized me up in minutes. It took me much longer to grasp the person I met that day. Until Zalman's passing in 1999, our interactions were intermittent. After he became Avichai chairman, we worked closely together for the next 21 years, and I came to admire this remarkable yet complicated man. Under Arthur's leadership, Avichai grew to become the most significant single contributor to a renaissance of pluralistic Jewish life in Israel. We were the largest philanthropic player in promoting Jewish education in state schools and informal Jewish study in open Batei Midrash. We promoted piyus, reconciliation between religious and secular, via mass media campaigns and religious secular schools. We fostered piyut, Jewish liturgical poetry, as a mainstream cultural phenomenon. We revitalized Jewish content on television and film, on the internet, and via modern commentaries on classic Jewish texts. We helped seed and grow pluralistic pre-army mechinot. We promoted tolerance and dialogue within the religious Zionist sector. We enhanced Jewish activity in community centers and municipalities, in the kibbutz and moshav movements, and we built Beit Avichai as an ongoing beacon of the foundation's values. Behind this creative burst of activity lay Arthur's indelible imprint. The broader public, and even some of our grantees, had no idea. He shunned the limelight. He declined giving speeches, At public gatherings, he sat in the back and left unobtrusively. He avoided site visits to program partners. To many, he was unseen, but within the corridors of Avichai, his presence was palpable. He outworked us all, the first to arrive and often the last to leave. He took note of almost everything happening in the workplace: meetings with project partners, staff absences, even furniture arrangements. He asked for regular updates on projects and plans and followed up with incisive questions. His frequent emails, whether from abroad or down the hall, commanded immediate attention. All caps, all bold, font size 14. His vigilance and work ethic set a powerful norm for our philanthropy, but his influence extended to other realms as well. Arthur understood that the key to our efforts was to find the best and brightest people and invest in their dreams. He was a perpetual talent scout and a savvy judge of character. We would meet with potential project partners, and he'd silently assess the intellectual capital and leadership potential around the table, afterwards pointing out with whom it's worth continuing the discussion. Almost always, he's correct. And once worthy partners were identified, he urged us to provide them with the resources and long-term support to pursue their dreams, even for high-risk ventures. Arthur applied the same talent-hunting skills to the Avichai board. He recruited most of the trustees. He also had the foresight to recognize that success in Israel depended on a board that better reflected the diversity of Israeli society. Due to his efforts, 3 members from Israel were added over time, 3 creative, intelligent voices offering perspectives markedly different from his own, as well as different from each other, which greatly expanded our understanding of what we can do to connect Israeli Jews to their heritage and to each other. He had one of the sharpest minds I knew, a God-given gift to cut through the dross and identify the heart of an issue. He guided us to do the same in our philanthropy. I once observed him discuss with one trustee a lengthy project proposal submitted by a distinguished public figure in Israel. Arthur calmly and methodically posed a series of questions about the project, its goals, its resources, its alignment with Avichai's mission. By the end of the conversation, the trustee concluded the project was not for us, something I'm sure Arthur thought as well, but never needed to declare. Now, Arthur had a reputation for being tough in meetings, and it was a reputation he often deserved. He disliked engaging in social amenities, preferring to get down to business. He asked penetrating questions. He was allergic to BS, incapable of speaking anything but the truth. His comments were invariably insightful, but for those unfamiliar with his style, it could be unnerving. I recall an introductory meeting with the drafters of a potential new project, one that eventually became one of our most successful grants. At the end of the grueling session, the project head, whom I knew well, approached me and asked, "Ellie, what was that?" I feel like I was just mugged. I replied that he had just experienced Arthur Fried at a first meeting. They later became good colleagues, regularly shooting the breeze together on the 3rd floor porch of Beit Avichai. Now, Arthur knew that his blunt truth-telling sometimes needed a gentler partner. He and I once debated the merits of a new proposal with the staff of one project grantee. Unhappy with what I was hearing, I abandoned my usual role as facilitator and sharply condemned the team for their inflexibility. Arthur gave me one of his piercing looks, took me aside, and said, "Ellie, you need to be you in those meetings." He had his role to play, and I needed to be faithful to mine. Just as Arthur spoke the truth to partners in the field, he spoke the truth to staff. If someone did good work, he would say so clearly. And if he thought Avichai standards were not met, he would let us know just as candidly. His praise inclined to the matter of fact. His criticism tended to be much more colorful. The ultimate Arthurian critique was to pronounce, "It's woolly," a term he adopted from the philosopher Isaiah Berlin, which meant an idea was shapeless, like sheep wool, lacking measurable goals, unworthy of philanthropic support. Although Arthur liked to project a tough facade in public, in private he could reveal a more sensitive side. We had a handful of heated arguments during our years working together. While I would still be seething from the exchange, he would stop by my office, close the door, explain his behavior, and seek amends. During more relaxed moments, he transformed into an engaging raconteur. He would recount vivid stories of Zalman, fellow Avichai trustees Henry Taub and Buddy Silberman of blessed memory, the Rothschilds, other individuals he knew through the years, and he would linger on his favorite topic, Susan's exploits as an English teacher of school children. Beneath that gruff exterior beat an outsized heart. He devoted his life to the Jewish people in the state of Israel out of a profound love of Judaism and a deep concern for the Jewish future. His actions for Avichai's staff demonstrated similar love and concern. He supported employees quietly but generously in times of illness or need, and helped as many as he could to find viable post-Avichai careers. His expressions of compassion touched me in powerful and sometimes surprising ways. Years ago, my wife Randy had surgery for breast cancer, and we were waiting anxiously for the pathology results. Arthur checked in with me regularly to hear if the report had yet arrived. When I finally informed him that she was clean of cancer, he gave me an exuberant hug and a kiss on the cheek, almost as relieved as I was. That was my only physical embrace from Arthur. He was not a hugger by nature, but I felt virtually embraced by him often. It is difficult now to fathom that Arthur is gone. I still expect an occasional phone call to hear how I'm doing, a sudden request to help him with a task. He was like no one else I knew, sharp, wise, insightful, rigorous, tough, demanding, relentless, hardworking, tireless, unselfish, and compassionate. He is irreplaceable. The best we can hope for is to be inspired by his example and toil selflessly as he did for the welfare of the Jewish people. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory be a blessing to us all.
ערב טוב לכולם. אני מצטער שבגלל קורונה אינני יכול להיות איתכם פיזית היום, בערב לזכרו של אדם ומנהיג מיוחד, ארתור פריד. לפני למעלה מ-20 שנה הכרתי לראשונה את ארתור. אני הייתי אז בסוכנות היהודית והוא כבר הוביל את קרן אביחי. ארתור סיפר לי על בית מורשה, מיזם שחשב שייתכן שהסוכנות תמצא בו עניין. ארתור הסביר ללא רגשנות מיותרת, ללא מילים גבוהות. דיבר בבהירות ובכנות. ההיגיון, ניקיון הדעת, היושרה, עשו עליי רושם עצום. אמרתי כן, לא רק בגלל המיזם, אלא בעיקר בגלל שרציתי להיות בשותפות עם האיש שישב מולי. רציתי בשותפות עם האיש הזה, כי נשבעתי בו, נשבעתי בארתור. אינני יודע אם נכון לומר ששווה את ליבי. לא הרגש היה שם העיקר, משהו אחר. מה היה המשהו האחר הזה שהיה ארתור פריד? ארתור היה מנהיג שקט, חכם ורב עוצמה. הוא לא היה צריך לצעוק כדי להישמע. נוכחותו הורגשה והעיניים היו נשואות למוצא פיו. הוא לא דיבר הרבה, אבל כל שאמר היה מבוסס על חשיבה עמוקה. כשהייתי נפגש מדי פעם עם ארתור, הרגשתי שזה לא המקום לדבר בו סתם. בנוכחות ארתור, סוף דיבור במחשבה תחילה. ארתור היה אדם צנוע, עם כל העוצמה שריכז בידו. לא זוכר שראיתיו אי פעם מתהדר בכוחו, או נהנה להסתופף בין אלה המכונים אנשים חשובים. הוא דן את האדם לפי אישיותו, לא לפי כיסו. ארתור היה משקיע פילנטרופי, אם אפשר לומר סופר אסטרטגי. הוא התייחס ברצינות גדולה למפעלים הפילנטרופיים שהוביל. הוא לא נמשך רק אחרי הלב, אחרי המצוקה או הכאב. הוא בחן את הצורך, את החשיבות, את הסיכוי להצליח, בחר את האסטרטגיה המועדפת והתרכז במימושה עד להצלחה. שיעור מאלף על חשיבה ופעולה אסטרטגית נתן ארתור לא רק בכל הפעילות של אביחי, אלא גם בדרך שבה הובילו מם והוא את תהליך סיום הפעילות. לאורך שנים הם עשו כל מאמץ לקיים את ההישגים של אביחי, גם אחרי סיום פעילותה הישירה של הקרן. לא האגו היה העיקר, אלא המהות. בדיעבד, ארתור כאילו הרשה לעצמו לפרוש רק אחרי שעשה כל שניתן למען המשך המפעל לדורות הבאים. ארתור בהחלט ידע להחליט, אבל בעיקר ידע להקשיב. הוא עודד דעות מגוונות, ורצה שתשמענה דעות שונות בטרם קיבל החלטה. כשצורפתי לוועד המנהל של קרן תקווה, אחותה הקטנה של אביחי, חשדתי שזה היה ארתור ששכנע אותם, שטוב שיהיה מסביב לשולחן גם מישהו עם זוויות ראייה אחרות. לא אחת הרגשתי נשען על אישיותו ופתיחותו כשהבעתי דעות שונות. לא ידעתי אם הוא מסכים איתי, אבל הרגשתי שחשוב לו שארגיש חופשי להשמיע את דעתי. מעניין שכשחלקתי את התחושה הזאת עם אחותי שכיהנה לצד ארתור בקרן אביחי, אמרה לי היא שלא פעם ארתור היה מתרגם אותה לחברים בישיבות הקרן, כדי להבטיח שדבריה יישמעו כפי שהיא הייתה רוצה. איש פתוח, חושב, מכבד. לשורש א' מ' נ' יש משמעויות שונות בעברית. ארתור לא היה איש שאומר אמן אחר אחרים. על אמונה לא דיברנו, אבל ארתור היה איש אמין מאין כמוהו. את שאמר קיים. אפשר היה לסמוך על מילה שלו ללא כל חשש. וארתור היה אדם נאמן, נאמן לדרכו, נאמן לשליחויות שקיבל על עצמו, נאמן למי שעבד עמו, נאמן לחבריו. אף שארתור נתן לעולם הפילנתרופיה הכללי דוגמה מאלפת על השקעה אסטרטגית, ארתור היה בראש ובראשונה יהודי גאה וציוני. זכורני שסיפר לי כיצד התרשם ממנחם בגין כשזה הגיע לראשונה כראש ממשלה לארצות הברית והקפיד לא לחלל שבת בפרהסיה. לא רק על שבת שמעתי אז מארתור, אלא על מנהיגות שאינה מתרפסת ועל יהדות גאה. ארתור היה איש של כלל ישראל. המשך קיומו המשותף של העם היהודי היה בראש מעייניו. כשנתן עדיפות לבתי ספר יומיים בארצות הברית, היו אלה לא רק בתי ספר מזן מסוים, אלא קשת רחבה של בתי ספר יומיים. הוא קידם חומרי לימוד משותפים עבור בתי ספר מן הזרמים השונים. כששם דגש על פעילות מחנות קיץ כמנוע חשוב לזהות יהודית, השקיע בכולם, לא רק בזרם אחד. בישראל קידם ארתור תרבות יהודית עברית לכלל ישראל. אם תרצו, יחד שבטי ישראל, אז זה ארתור פריד. בכל פעילותו הייתה הציונות במרכז. לפעולות החשובות שהוביל בקרב יהודי התפוצות היה תנאי, מרכזיות ישראל בהוויית הארגון. וכמובן שארתור שם דגש מיוחד על הפעילות בארץ, המקום העיקרי בו נכתב הסיפור היהודי בציון. אולי הביטוי העמוק ביותר לציונות של ארתור הייתה בחירתו לעלות לארץ ועם סוזן לגדל בה את משפחתם. ארתור יכול היה לגור בכל מקום בעולם, יכול היה לבקר בארץ מארצות הברית או משוויץ, אבל הוא בחר לחיות בארץ ולצאת מכאן לביקורים בארצות הברית ובשוויץ. משפחתו היא העדות החזקה ביותר לציוניותו. יותר מ-40 שנה הותיר ארתור חותם על מדינת ישראל והעם היהודי. לעד תתנוסס תמונתו בבית המשפט העליון, ולנצח יספר בית אביחי את סיפורו. אבל לא הבניינים הם העיקר, אלא הרוח הפועמת בהם. קשה לחשוב על היהדות הישראלית המתחדשת ללא רוחו והנהגתו של ארתור. חיבור היהודים הישראלים למקורות תרבותם, היצירה הקולנועית היהודית המודרנית, תחיית הפיוט והבאתו למרכז הבמה, אלה רק דוגמאות להשפעתו של ארתור על רוחם של היהודים בישראל. התרחבות החינוך היהודי היומי בארצות הברית, ההתעוררות התרבותית היהודית בברית המועצות לשעבר, ההתפתחות של מחנות הקיץ לנוער היהודי בתפוצות, כל אלה פירות רוחו ופועלו של ארתור. אנחנו מכבדים היום אדם שברח מכבוד. אנחנו מצדיעים היום לאיש של שליחות, של שירות, של נאמנות. איש שדרכו ישרה ומבטו ישיר. אדם שפיו וליבו שווים. כנאמר במזמור המיוחס לדוד המלך, הולך תמים ופועל צדק ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה, וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס, ואת יראי אדוני יכבד. נשבע להרע ולא ימיר. כספו לא נתן בנשך, ושוחד על נקי לא לקח. יחיד ומיוחד היה ארתור. באנגלית היינו אומרים one of a kind. הוא יחסר מאוד לא רק למשפחתו, אלא לעם היהודי ולחברה בישראל. הלוואי שנשכיל להמשיך להשקות את העצים שנטע כדי שפירותיהם יהוו מזון רוחני לילדי ישראל. שנמשיך לטעת עצים בדרכו לכלל ישראל, ושרוחו הטובה ודרכו הישרה והחכמה ימשיכו לשכון בקרבנו. יהי זכרו ברוך, יתברך ישראל בזכרו וברוחו.
I will conclude this evening by reading two poems, one written by Arthur and one written about him. The first arrived in the form of an email to Lauren and me from Arthur late in the summer of 2019. In August of that year, Lauren wrote to Arthur and said, "As I putter in my vegetable garden and experiment making fried green tomatoes, I'm thinking of you and hoping France is as lovely as ever. Shabbat Shalom to Susan and you and the family." To which Arthur responded, "Our garden has fed a host of Frieds this summer. 30 of them have passed through, with 6 departing on Sunday and 6 more on Wednesday, some expressing a desire to return for Hanukkah late this year, good for skiing. So we grow old with children and grandchildren. As their appetite for life and for veggie expands. Today was a huge put-away, utilizing the present male power, but also including assembling the sukkah frame. Less work for us when we return in October. Enjoy the August light. Ideally, the sun will shine forever. Arthur. The second poem was composed millennia ago by David HaMelech, by King David, and I will read Tehillim Mizmor Chav Gimel, Psalm 23, first in Hebrew and then in English. Mizmor David, Adonai Ra'i lo echsar, bin ot desha yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek, lema'an shmo. Gan ki elech begeitz al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha u'mishantecha, hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai, shulchan, neged zorarai, dishanta b'shemen roshi, kosi rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti bebeit Adonai la'orech yamim. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He lies me down in green pastures. He leads me to still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Yehi Zechro Baruch, may his memory be a blessing.
We'd like to thank all the speakers, the people that were here, and of course, the memory of Arthur. Thank you for being here. Thank you.